look at the dynastic Egypt and the dynastic Sumeria, also the Babylon, and the other Nubian kings of the antiquity, there is one thing that is pretty common across the board, and that is whenever the emperor has been given relentless powers, the emperor becomes unhinged, leading up to the creation of a system that is based upon lack of humanity or inhumane dynamics. In other words, each time you look at these oppressive kingdoms of the antiquity across the board, you can see one thing in common, and that is inhumane elements in their ruling practices. You can trace it as back as the Uruk, such as the Sumerians and the Babylonians. Or if you go back in time, you will track it back all the way to the book of Enoch. That is the fourth generation after the first man and the woman, according to the Abrahamic Accords, peace be upon them all, were sent to populate and to terraform this planet Earth 1.0. Now, if you look at it, the descendant of the giants, they are genetically modified creatures who, with the help of the corruption and the facade, means something that you put as the shopfront. Again, a facade in a way that you put a shopfront to sell your services covertly. Means the shopfront says something and you are selling something else. It means, in this context, these genetically modified creatures who conspired and conjured a plan or some plans, a subset of plans, to implement them further on their dynasty, resulting in creating a smokescreen that forced the people to be the victim of their false narrative. And the more you take the liberty of humans away and you instill them with fear, the more control you get as an emperor. And that practice in itself can be compiled under one syntax, and that syntax or that word can be called as a facade, just a shopfront. Now, what happened afterwards? According to the hasis or hasis, this story of the creation of this planet, and also the Abrahamic Accords and the Apocrypha, there's one thing in common, that these genetically modified beings who then rose to powers by using certain rituals, certain practices that led them where they, with the help of their armies and their cabinet, so-called cabinet, were able to implement a blanket plan that segregated people in class system. You have the elite class, so you have no laws, no obligations, no protocols, nothing that's been applied on them. They are completely free from any form of persecution. Then you have another category of people who are in charge over those who are the victims. So you have the peasants, every single law applies on them. They have to live by the protocols and they cannot question the authority. Above them, there is the ruling class. That ruling class is also completely immune of a lot of laws and protocols. You notice here I said a lot of means there are certain laws that they will still be held accountable to in case they do something that challenges the elite class, right? So you have the middle class, that's the ruling class. It's ruling over the peasants, and they are hired by the top elite to serve their agendas and imply them and implement them onto the poor peasants. Now that middle class has this obligation to serve the elite. So anything or everything they do, they will have to protect. So they have to protect the elite and they have to oppress the least, right? Anything they do that will cause harm to the elite, they will get under the wrath of the elite class. So they are somehow susceptible to certain laws, but in general they are immune to these laws. And then you have the top elite class, like I said, they have no obligations. They are free from any form of persecution. They are protected and guarded and are completely under cover from getting under the wrath of laws. Now, that is not human, is it? It's inhumane. Almost like we as human beings, when we look at their behaviors towards the other humans, we tend to question the existence. We tend to think, are they even human? So, by putting it on paper, you gotta think. These descendants of the giants, the genetically modified beings, they created a genetic manipulation formula. And that formula was then presented to their hand-picked scientific individuals who then created certain lobbies. Those lobbies were then hired to genetically modify humans to create a slave race. Yup, the genetic manipulation formulas were created and brought from other planets, other dimensions, by these beings who can travel the vast distances of space because they have the technology, because they conspire and they work with the beings from the other dimensions. And we all know them as jinns or shapeshifters or whatever you want to call them, the beings that live in other dimensions. And we know mathematically there are 11 dimensions that we can perceive in our lifetimes. From this planet. Now, this planet is a dimension with 3 spatial dimensions and 1 dimension of time. Every single human being is in contact with at least 11 dimensions. They exist around us, and they are spatial dimensions. So, the beings who live in other dimensions, mathematically it is proven, you can then easily draw up the conclusions. Those conclusions are given in the previous scriptures as beings living in other dimensions. They are beings, they are living beings. People call them jinns. Or in the Abrahamic scriptures, they are known as jinns. So that's an actual word or a title, you can say that. Jinn means something that comes from the unseen. That's the meaning of the word jinn. Ja and na. The resonance and the pronunciation of this syntax or this code explains beings that live in another dimension or other dimensions, multiple. Now, what's that?